Hello, and welcome to Electrifying Growth, a podcast brought to you by Edison Partners. I'm Krish Sugden, managing partner here at Edison and your host. There are moments in a person or company's journey that are undeniably electric. The spark or sparks, if you will, that propel you or your company to new heights. With Electrifying Growth, we're here to have in-depth, real conversations with great leaders who have been there and done it before. Edison has been investing in high-growth technology companies for more than 35 years, and I have been here at Edison doing this investing piece for more than 20 years. We've led over 225 investments. We understand that it takes great leaders and visionaries to build market leaders. We are your support system, a CEO and management's entourage, if you will. Let's introduce this episode's guest.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Electrifying Growth. Really excited about introducing you all to my guest today, Krish Chopra. Krish is the founder and CEO of NPHub. NPHub is solving a mission-critical bottleneck in the healthcare system. Clinical places of nurse practitioner students today, and as you'll hear from Krish in the future, really all caregivers. And as we've called this episode, really saving healthcare one provider at a time. Since founding NPHub in 2015, also a 10-year overnight success, which we'll talk about in the episode, Krish built a platform that has helped thousands of students navigate a broken placement process. He's done it with a clear vision and a fierce commitment to customer experience. And even more impressively, didn't raise a dime for the first 10 years of the business, which we'll also talk about that capital efficiency. His work doesn't just drive revenue, it drives healthcare capacity and, quite frankly, saves lives. In a post-pandemic world, that mission has never mattered more. Krish is also the author of NP Jumpstart and a serial entrepreneur with deep domain and operational roots from his time building United Medical Rotations. You'll hear him talk about that experience during the course of our conversation. And frankly, kind of call it full disclosure, Edison recently led the company's first and only institutional round of capital with a $20 million growth investment. We'll talk a little bit about what he's doing with now that he's got capital to drive growth even faster. We believe this is one of the most meaningful and scalable solutions, really addressing the nursing, but not only nursing provider shortage in America. Krish is exactly the kind of founder we look to back, resilient, resourceful, and relentlessly focused on great results and outcomes. So enjoy our conversation where Chris and I kind of cover from how he started back there 10 years ago to sort of what drove him all the way back in his early days, in his first corporate job, as he'll talk about what he learned there. So enjoy this episode with Krish Chopra, founder, CEO of NPHub. Krish Chopra, thanks for joining me on Electrifying Growth today. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me today.
Absolutely. This is pretty fresh. In the wedding, when people recently get married, we're in the honeymoon stage of our relationship. And I say that the Edison relationship because my partner, Kelly Ford, led the investment for Edison. And I'll talk more about that or ask you more about that. But really appreciate you joining me today. And we read the bio. People who listen to the episode already heard a little bit, but I feel like that's scratching the surface of what really makes entrepreneurs tick, and talk about your entrepreneurial DNA in a minute. But what don't we see in LinkedIn and, your bio that kind of makes Krish Chopra?
That's a great question. I would say, I think fundamentally, I'm much more low key than the position might indicate than, raising capital with Edison Partners. Like, my favorite things to do with my wife are, let's go to a restaurant. It's a hole in the wall. And it's very from that Queens kid, like the way I grew up. Right. And so like the best restaurants weren't the fancy ones. It was always the, under the train tracks, and they served 3 types of tacos, but they were the best tacos of your life. And so I would say that's the biggest misconception, or what, my LinkedIn's going to talk about NPHub, published author, other stuff. But fundamentally, that's who I am, is the low key guy that likes the hidden gems.
So that doesn't mean you're an introvert, or does it?
No, not at all. I would classify me as a classic extrovert. I absolutely love time to myself. And I think, one of the things I'm so excited about the CEO summit coming up next week or the week after, I am absolutely that person that I can get ramped up, I can get wound up and go 100 miles an hour. And it's fun. It can cause a lot of stress and chaos. And so, no, I'm an extrovert, and no question about it. Yeah, no question.
Well, that's funny because the theme of the CEO Summit, which you may have already gotten a little notice of, is creating healthy urgency, because so many entrepreneurs are. Chaos is the name of the game when you're just starting, as you know, and that sometimes as you scale, that can create a lot of, we may get into that here and see if it leads to some fun CEO Summit talk. And what's funny is when you came to our annual meeting back in May, you were still, both sides were kind of feeling each other out, and you were one who absolutely worked the room. And You were doing your due diligence to get to know everybody. That does stick out for me.
It was a big decision, right? This was the first time we brought in any investment, let alone significant institutional investment, tier one type of fund. Like, that was a major shock to the way the business is run in many ways. So, you don't get married on day one, right? You date for years. Obviously, due diligence is sort of like that equivalency.
And frankly, a two-way street, which we liked about you.
Yeah, it felt like a two-way street. That was what was unique, and versus other funds we were speaking with, it was much more one way. And then we were like, well, we don't even know if we want to partner with you guys,
Right.
So
Right.
that was, I think, one of the unique things about our process here. I think that was in May, June.
But we're going to come back to this capital efficiency, good old fashioned bootstrapping versus raising a bunch of capital. So noted. But I want to talk about whether or not you have entrepreneurship in your DNA, or is it something that just kind of evolved over time? So take me to growing up. Were parents entrepreneurs? Were kind of family members?
No. I grew up in the very sort of typical first generation immigrant family, right? Parents, especially being Indian, it was like, if you're going to do anything, you're going to be a doctor.
I was going to say, you're disappointed because you're not a doctor or lawyer? I'm just kidding.
My mom, 5 years ago, this is when NPHub was doing at least 3.8 in revenue. My mom said, it's not too late to go to med school. And so, that was the last time I heard of it, years and years ago, but that's what it was. But no, I think that entrepreneurs come in two types, right? You're kind of like the born entrepreneur, the high school kid that has like a paper route, that has a lawn mowing business. And then you have the converted entrepreneur. And that's what I was. Like, I started off corporate out of college. Before college, I was very much I want to go in consulting or banking, maybe go to law school. And I was studying for the LSAT for a quick, a few months there. And so that was the path I was on. And I found myself wanting to start a company. I found myself not fitting in corporate America.
Yep.
And I didn't fit that mold. And so I was worried I would cap out there and I would never get to actually figure out what I can do. And so the company became that opportunity for me of, let me move out of New York City to Atlanta, let me restart and let me figure this out and see if I can. And what was the harm in failing, And so
that's sort of the beauty of Call It America, right? We sort of are okay with failing as long as you keep going. So I saw on your LinkedIn, you talk about that first job, that corporate America AT&T job, and you say something like it was the best experience you've ever had, or that early sort of first job. Mm-hmm. I think you say something about it kind of molded you. So what are you talking about there on your LinkedIn?
So it taught me a few things. First, it was a great training program in corporate sales. So I learned how to sell and ask questions. And that was key. And then the second thing is it was they provided stack rankings, which scared you earlier on. But what was great is when you were doing well, man, you felt on top of the world.
Momentum, right?
Exactly. And so I remember that first year out of 1,000 sellers, I think I was ranked 70th. And then in the second year when I left halfway through the year. At that point, I was ranked 15th out of 1,000.
Isn't that amazing that you remember that? Like, think about what that...
Well, I will always... But Chris, it's a double-edged sword. The reason I remember it is because when I left, no one asked me to stay, and they didn't backfill the role. And had they asked me to stay. Just a director telling me, hey, Krish, we see something in you.
Put your arm around you, right?
I probably would have. And that was when I realized, even in that game, even if I was performing well, I didn't fit into that dynamic.
Yeah, it almost didn't feel like it mattered.
It didn't matter. I didn't fit into that culture. And so then it was, okay, well, where can I figure this out? Where can I create the culture that, I would want to work at? And so how to then find people that didn't fit into the big corporate culture, but they just wanted a shot. And that's kind of how we built our culture at a company over the last 6, 7 years.
Amazing. Well, that's pretty cool. And not only cool, but it's a little disheartening when you think about here's corporate America. But without that happening, we would have a bunch of people like you out there building great companies. So let's just talk for a few minutes about NPHub itself. NP for nurse practitioner. I read a little bit in the bio, but it never really comes to life. Not only what the company does, but your inspiration for it, I think are both interesting stories. And we'll talk about the healthcare kind of problem in a minute, but just talk about the company and kind of what you do and how'd you see the problem?
So I'll start with how I saw the problem, right? Because it's kind of a progression of a story. My first company that was successful, it was doing clinical placements for medical students. And so we were one of 15 companies in the country doing this placement service for schools in the Caribbean. We were one of the first ones to go out to the Philippines and create a funnel of students, brought them to the US for education there. and it was going well. But because we were sort of late in the space, there was no opportunity to innovate. The business was done that way, and you can either do it that way or not.
It was fine, but it wasn't innovative.
Exactly.
Okay.
There was no innovation. And so then we found out that nurse practitioners in the US, my initial assessment was there's no way these students are struggling this hard. And I didn't listen to the market for a full year. And then when I finally started to listen, and student after student after student, I realized these nurse practitioners it's a larger market. There's so many that don't have the support. So the TAM from a business point of view is higher. Great. High five there. But the unique thing is, if we didn't do the work that we were doing, they didn't graduate. So then we had an impetus of, okay, you had the market opportunity there, and all we had to do is be better than a regional competitor that was in California. And well, we operated with, okay, we're going to innovate, we're going to build tech. And because of that, we were the fastest to scale up.
So talk a bit about what it is those students need, because I think, educate us a little bit on this gap between you get trained and then what, right? I get educated, but I also need to get trained. Maybe I should say that.
Exactly. And so every healthcare professional, right? Pick a credential, DOs, MDs, PAs, anything. They do classroom training, which, I like to joke is the boring stuff. And then they do clinical training in a hospital or a clinic. And this is where most providers will tell you they got the most out of it, because they're shadowing under real people, seeing real patients. And this is what students right now in the US, nurse practitioners, they have to find it on their own in a majority of the cases. There are some schools that support them. Many schools, they don't have the infrastructure. They don't have the ability to support them. And so what we come in and we do is we partner with the student directly, or we partner with the institution. And so with schools like we're working with, like Yale or USC, they'll send us a list of student placements they need, and we handle that for them. For the student to come to us directly, maybe they go to a smaller program, maybe they go to a less well-renowned program. They still need support. They still need clinicals. And so they come to our platform and they can essentially find a placement just like you would find an Airbnb.
So talk about that sort of B2C versus B2B2C, if you will. And I think if I have it right, again, I'm not somewhat of a straight man, but your word B2C, like you said, hey, we got to prove this can work before schools are going to really hire us. Do I have that right? Sort of chicken and the egg kind of?
Absolutely right. So, and it was about schools proving, it was about us getting the model correct so we can go to a school and say, hey, we're the best at what we do. It was also a circumstance of the time where, as being bootstrapped back in the day, it was, if the schools are going to be the gatekeeper, and maybe it would take us a year to close a deal. Great. We still had headcount. We still had payroll.
Right, got to support it.
The B2C was essentially cutting out the middle person, in this case, the university. And we're benefiting from regulatory changes as well, where now schools are becoming more responsible. There's no more mandates that they have to do it. And so now that the schools have to do it, they're in the situation of, well, we don't know how, we don't know the infrastructure. Who are we going to use? Well, we're the highest scaled player in the space. And so that's been really beneficial. And so B2C is incredible. I don't ever want to lose that side of the business because it's so hard to get right, and we figured it out over years. But B2B is absolutely, sort of like, imagine it's a stool. We're building a stool right now.
So from a student's perspective, the value is somewhat obvious. You're going to help them land with a clinician, someone who can kind of show them the ropes in real life. Why is that hard? Why is that difficult? I think I understand that there's just either not that many, or you can't find them, and you're going to get your NP degree, but shoot, I didn't know I had to go find a rotation, as they say.
Well, the stories we get, Chris, it's equally heartbreaking and equally just like mind-boggling if you hear it. And these are students that they're working in hospitals, right, as a nurse. That's their undergraduate degree. They are taking days off of work to go cold call clinics. And maybe there's, I have a sales team dedicated every single day to doing this, that's trained. But now you're taking basically a healthcare professional that's great at their job, and you're putting them in an environment of sales. And I'm not, like, you would never ask me to come suture a patient. Why were you asking to cold call and, go a preceptor? And so, A, it's hard, but then B, there's no quality control. Right. And so then the question is, okay, these are the folks that are taking care of us. Preceptor is the academic name of the person that teaches. So essentially it's an apprenticeship model, right? We're kind of shadowing under someone. The person you're shadowing under is a preceptor.
Got it. So I don't like to go way in deep in unit economics, but I think it's kind of interesting because you've got the students paying the school for their tuition. Now the students got to pay, I'll say not you, NPHub, for the placement. Help with like the value for the student. Somewhat obvious. I want to land a job and I need to finish my education. But there's a hurdle there because they're thinking, I'm paying the school. Why aren't they helping me? So I'm kind of curious the dialogue over time to make sure the student understood the value, you know?
Yeah, 100%. For the students, they either, if they don't graduate, this is a complete waste for them. And so you have the sunk cost dynamic that's occurring, right? They've sunk in, 50, 60 to 100 grand in their education. And now the question is, okay, I need to maybe sink in another 5 to 10,000. And so in that 10,000, they get the chance to graduate, and their income generally jumps from about 85K as an RN up to about 125 to 135 as an NP. And so you get a significant value. And then the other big benefit is these hospitals don't treat their nurses well. We saw that during COVID. And so we know there's a shortage of nurses. We know there's a shortage of physicians, and hospitals are struggling. And so these nurses are leaving the bedside in droves. And it's no different than an MBA kid, right? They work 2 years, they're in banking, they go back to school so they can either go back or they can move somewhere else and they maybe switch careers. Same concept here that's happening. And this is what the students, they know there's a $50,000 raise for them.
Yeah. And then what's interesting is in real life, the job's only a little bit different.
They go from being the order taker to the order maker, essentially.
Yeah, they're actually doing some, that's fair.
Yeah. And so there is, you have the accountability difference there, but these nurses that have worked as RNs for years, they tend to be fantastic at nurse practitioners because they have a sixth sense about it. There's intuition built into this. And that's something that, not to play a game of comparison, a PA or an MD, they are going straight through years and years of schooling into the hospital. And so it's kind of like hiring a PhD candidate. Yes, they're brilliant, but they need that minute to adjust to a work environment.
Right. They know the regular interaction. They're in truly the bedside manner. So let's talk about the kind of getting back to the entrepreneurial journey. You mentioned bootstrapped. I mentioned that it hit Edison, frankly, right between the eyes. If we can have 100% bootstrap companies, we're all about that because I think, you spend, I hate to say our money or our limited partners' money like it's your money. And you're also thinking all the time about how to make it go further. But that journey from zero to scale is a long one because you don't have that fuel. And I like to say a lot of these companies are kind of 10-year overnight successes. In this case, literally, right? I think you started in 2015. So talk a little bit about the mentality that said, I'm not going to take money till I prove it. Was it about the cap table? Was it about just, we don't need it? How'd you get there in terms of the first couple of years of kind of pushing people out of the way that might have been knocking on your door?
That's a really good question. So there's a couple things to it. One is I wanted to build it a certain way. And having an investor is fantastic. Having an investor really early on, and they're operating with a different playbook, they have accountability to their LPs. And that's going to inform their decision-making. And so that was a big part of it, which is I wanted to build it this way. Yep. I knew that. And so...
Is that culture or product, both? Talk about when you say this way.
It was both. And there's a part of our culture, right? So we have a large contracting remote team. We did that because once we figured that out, it allowed us to deliver an excellent service at a fraction of the cost.
Yeah, keep it variable too. Yeah.
Students are the happiest because we're high touch, but you couldn't accomplish that in the US. And so there was that was a dynamic that we wanted to work with. And the other part of it is nurse practitioners. We were starting to play with NPs in 2015, but the company started in 2017. Before COVID, most people, and even something after COVID, I got in a room with investors and I asked them, hey, do you know what a nurse practitioner is? And 3 out of 15 people raised their hand. And that was 2 years
crazy
ago. And so I think we benefited from sort of being hidden in the market. And then over the years, you see this explosion now of where are the PAs, where are the NPs? And so we benefit a lot from the market, the tailwinds in the market.
Now the need is more obvious to people, I guess you're saying.
Now everyone knows about it versus 5-6 years ago, people didn't know about it. And so I think those were the key things. And I think the last thing that you maybe mention here is we bootstrapped for a long time. And so we reinvested every dollar into the company. I reinvested every dollar I could into the company. When you're doing $2 million in revenue and you want to invest $50,000 into the company, you can make a significant impact. One of the impetuses of raising is that same $50,000 when you're doing, 8, 10, 12, 15 million in revenue, it doesn't move the needle anymore.
Yeah, you start having that at zero, don't you?
Exactly. Yeah. You start having added zero. And that's exactly what's happening now. And now we're seeing, oh, wow, you're right. We just invested 500 G's into this over the next year and we're seeing impact already. And it was a scale issue. And so we had to go out to raise.
So we were fortunate enough we spent time getting to know each other. We talked about the two-way street of diligence. Mm-hmm. And this is not meant to be an Edison suck-up question. So please, I'll try to phrase it away. What were you looking for? And we're glad Edison showed you that, but were there certain things from whether it was alignment, whether it was the help you wanted, kind of talking to another entrepreneur saying, here are the things I was looking for, and here are the things that kind of you might see in the market, if that makes sense.
I've thought about this a lot because there's 2 or 3 things. And so Kelly, like you mentioned, is the investor, is sort of our primary investor. And having an investor that was a former operator added credibility. And when she gives me an idea or says something, I listen to it because I know she has the experience.
At least walk the walk. Yeah.
100%. So I think that was one. And 2, what you guys did differently that other funds do is you had this weird dating dynamic of like this, like people are playing hard to get, right? Like the entrepreneurs always taught, hey, go create FOMO, go create FOMO. You know, the investors are like, okay, if we like them, but don't act like you like them. It's like, let's just stop the nonsense. And so what was great about Edison is you guys were really clear you wanted to do the deal. And I cannot tell you that was probably the number 1 or number 2 reason why you won the deal. It wasn't like you guys paid the most or offering the most money. It was never that. It was you wanted to do this deal. And other investors were like, okay, we kind of want to do it. And Kelly's here like, yo, I'm ready to go. And I'm like,
let's
okay.
go.
Like, that's it. All right.
I'm glad you're observing the operator investor DNA. We feel like we have that. That's intentional. Glad to hear it showed up. But the other part is there is this kabuki theater, I like to call it, after many, many years doing this. It's like, can we just cut through the BS and frankly share with you, here's the valuation. It's not a black box. Here's what we think we're going to sell the business for. Here's what we think you can build the company to. So let's just kind of peel that on your back. To your point, if you want to do the deal, tell the other side that. So you're actually checking off a lot of boxes that I think the industry still thinks you've got to play a lot of show and tell and play a game. And frankly, in some ways make it more complicated than it is.
100%. Like having a partner at a great fund tell you, I want to do this deal. Let's get this deal done right now. That moves the needle forward, even if there's still questions to be answered later. And that's fine. But like the minute you just think too many bootstrapped entrepreneurs like myself, they want that validation from, like, we almost kind of see like the private equity, the VC world. They're almost kind of like I don't want to say the grown-ups, but they are the ones controlling the capital, right? And so in a way, you have to validate your business.
There's like an endorsement, at the same time.
It's an endorsement concept, right? And so we can't get around that. And so the fact that like you have a fund that's actively open around that, and that's what they're doing to you, and they're giving you that credibility boost, that is in itself moves the needle significantly. And
thank you for sharing that. I think when this plays, but I'll make sure Kelly and my team hear it because I hope we do it every time because it's important. You mentioned this is a little bit off topic, but not totally. New York, Queens kid, Atlanta. You grew the business in Atlanta. You're growing the business in Atlanta.
Yes, sir.
Talk about, the pros and cons of the two. Won't pick on the hometown of Queens, but just why has Atlanta been a great place? And by the way, audience knows we're big believers in the Southeast, and we've opened an office in Nashville. So this isn't meant to be a, loaded question, but I'm just kind of curious from your perspective.
Yeah, I'm happy to kind of talk openly about it. So, out of college, a lot of folks, they think of 2 things, right? They're like, hey, I need to go kind of figure out who I am. I want to go kind of reset and restart my life, whatever, become the person I want to be. And they usually have 3 cities in mind, right? You have the New York, LA, or the Bay. Well, I wasn't going to the West Coast. And so on the East Coast, I went to New York. I was there for a little bit. And for me, I am more singularly focused. So I can't multitask. Like I always tell entrepreneurs, like young ones that reach out to me just starting out, hey, build your product on the side, work your 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. every single day and hustle through that. But I'm a hypocrite because I couldn't do that. So for me, it was like, okay, I saved up a bunch of money, right? I learned how to live off my base salary and my first sales job. And then I saved up my commission. So I saved up some money and I could either carry that for about 4 or 5 months in New York, or I can carry that for 6 or 8 months in Atlanta.
Just that simple. Practical, did the math.
It was that practical. And then as we started to scale and grow over the years, New York is a very competitive market. It's an expensive market. It is hard to bootstrap yourself in New York City. In Atlanta, there's key differences. Office space is much cheaper and things like that. But practically, you have really good talent here. You have UGA, you have Georgia State, you have Kennesaw. Obviously, UGA is of a great tier. You have Georgia Tech as well, and Emory.
Right.
If you can nab a few folks out of there, you are getting really good talent.
Right.
And that is what is unique in New York. That top tier talent is in a lot of debt, and then where are they going? They're going to the banks, they're going to consulting, they're going to private equity, whatever. But that same type of talent in Atlanta, they're usually leaving Atlanta. And so the ones that want to stay, they're looking for those opportunities. And so education is strong here. And then the weakest part about Atlanta so far to date is the fundraising scene. It isn't, without a question.
Availability of capital, how easy it is to get in front of those people. That was a trickier.
Yeah, that was trickier. I always found a lot more success dealing with investors from the Northeast. I think it's also just my communication style and that style. So there's no surprise, that this sort of worked out. But I would say, for anyone who runs a fund, Atlanta has really good talent. It has really good companies. They don't have enough strong investment partners. And so your opportunity is to come in and meet everyone, and you can get in front of the scene in a month.
Right. Right.
And so, sure, you guys are doing that right now.
It's very, very true. And that is the underserved market element. And even Atlanta, which is fairly established throughout the Southeast, there's so many opportunities. Your point about just quite frankly being practical, a buck goes a lot further. It's so darn true. It's like an offshore, onshore model. like you're
I know you guys moved from Jersey down to Nashville, right? And I'm sure part of that is the tax benefit and then the access to the companies. But did you guys see also your burn and not burn, but your operating expenses are decreasing? Like, how did that work for you?
It's interesting. That was a little less, but the practical part of it, quite frankly, COVID put the idea of we couldn't get the young people, frankly, back to the office. I'll call it pre-COVID days. The young people would start with us, analyst associates, get an apartment in Princeton, and eventually a year or two, they might want Philly or New York scene. But they'd still come to the office because they'd go, oh, that's where I work. Well, it created a really tricky thing. And we weren't like hardcore back to the office, but there is like your business, a preceptor. Young people need to learn, and you just don't get the same experience. And so they weren't coming back to the office. So quite frankly, Kelly and I kind of led this sort of, we had 4 or 5 cities in mind, Nashville one, but how can we find a live, work, play environment? And, I'll share my, you think good investors would think of all these things. Honestly, the tax benefit, I was like a year later in establishing residency in Tennessee than I needed to be. So for those who think it's only that, certainly glad I did it once I figured that out. But I think honestly, it was the ability, because like you just said, New York, a young person, they can actually buy a house sooner. They can actually live 15 minutes, 20 minutes, Nashville's growing, and I'm sort of always saying is going to be the next Atlanta or Austin. Are we going to figure out infrastructure, right, in terms of traffic?
Nashville is a destination city. And so you benefit as well because
exactly.
One of the things I think about is people want to go to Nashville, right? You have
a fun place to visit.
Massive bachelorette sort of like scene there. You have all those bars there. So you get people visiting, but it's known to have good food. Like, so you get a lot of benefit. There's a great airport there, or it's a reasonable airport.
It's kind of easy.
It's a lot easier. And so, getting dragged to Nashville, twice a year now, minimum, maybe 3 times. I have no issue with it. I'm stoked to go. And so it's a fun town.
So you kind of take all of that. And at the end of the day, though, I think that's what our young people have now said to us. Wow, this is a lot more affordable than the Northeast. So that should have been higher on the list. But the bottom line is the idea of being able to kind of work closely. And frankly, I don't ask this as much as I did 2 years ago, right? Or a year and a half ago. Get the return to work thing and all that debate we all had. I think we've all realized you better have some time together. Mm-hmm. Yes, there are remote kind of native companies, but for the most part, young people like to learn and be around people.
What do you find is sort of like that sweet spot with you guys in Nashville or even like, the other portfolio companies of managing in office or out of office?
It's interesting. Obviously, again, there are native remote companies. They started even before the pandemic, there were companies who were trying this out and it worked. I would say almost to a person, those who didn't start that way are back to some degree between 2 and 4 days a week. Yeah. I've got some hardcore CEOs who are like, no, every day if you're not in front of a client, right? We're back in the office. Well, that's probably not the average. The median is 3 days. And you'll find that some people show up more because they just like work in the office and home's not the best place for them to work. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, our business versus the portfolio companies, you always have one day where you're trying to do investment committee and pipeline meetings. So there's always that natural one day.
Yeah.
And we also are supposed to be in front of folks like you before we win the deal, lawyers, accountants, all that. So naturally your job, just like a salesperson, is out in the market. Okay. But the bottom line is the home base and those hallway conversations, sitting on a bunch of boards. I'd say the CEOs always, for young people, are they just trying to look over my shoulder. No, it's actually that learning, right? That just, kind of shoulder to shoulder. And I think that's the beauty of small companies too. Younger people get to spend time with more senior people
Yep.
in small companies, and they love that.
100%. My only EA recently was promoted. She went from being my EA for 2.5 years to a university account manager managing.
That's awesome.
USC, I think probably doubled her income in the last 2 years. And so she's crushing it, and we spend a lot of time together. I have new managers working with my operator, my COO, and they craft their own performance for review. And so, they're getting more exposure. And so
the opportunity. Right?
Exactly. And, there's also call a spade. Small companies like mine, we don't have great training programs. And so a lot of learning is unconscious competence.
On the job. Right.
Oh, that's a bad call. And it's like, why is it a bad call? It's, well, let me tell you how I would do it. I don't know why it's a bad call. I just know it was,
And it becomes an instinct over time. Right.
Yeah.
So a couple personal things. I see the audience can see some superhero Marvel. Is that from a kid, or is there something about, superheroes? Where'd that come from?
That is one of my oldest friend, actually. I met him when I was 5. He actually 3D printed it for me and sent it down to me. I'm a big Marvel fan growing up. And so I have that over there. And then I got a couple other Marvel things.
Exactly. Okay. So favorite.
And
there you go. See?
Over there.
So is Spider-Man the guy for you, or is there someone else?
Well, Spider-Man grew up I'm 2 miles away from where I grew up, or 3 miles away from where I grew up. I don't know. I think for me now, it's actually weird. It's less about the particular hero, even though they're sort of in a down wave. I love what Disney has done and created that sort of these 30, 40 movies inside this one universe. I love that model because it builds on each other, right?
Yeah.
I always got frustrated. You see a movie, you spend 3 hours in it, and then that world is
That's
gone.
it. Exactly. Right.
The world is gone. And so this way, it's you have this one world, and this is all occurring. So I actually kind of love that nowadays.
So I'll have you pan your camera a little to your left, because this is I like to make a joke, and hopefully it doesn't fall flat. In a world of, yeah, exactly. See, I'm even willing to do this, which in a world where we all just get along, right? It's I'll put up my little S here.
Of course you are, yes.
This is how I like to prove, because frankly, you've got on your board, here you are with Kelly Ford, also a Spartan. So when Greg joined us, Greg Michelson, I used to say, this is how we prove we don't discriminate. This is our kind of test.
That is your way. And
we can actually work together.
Observer on our board as well. And so I have both of it.
So the bottom line is, we don't discriminate. We're wide open to blue and green can all get along. I'm not going to bet on my team in football. I got to be honest. I bleed green. But here's what we'll do. Give me the win total for your Wolverines in football this year. We'll see who gets the closest. I'm going to give you mine back on my team as well.
All right. I'm going to give them 10-2.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to give them a win over OSU this year again. And I'm going to take them as a first loss, and it'll be a bad loss in the playoffs.
Wow. That is some blue shitted glasses given last year, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, of course. And
you're seeing a big move in the right direction.
I could be completely wrong on, I don't think I'm wrong off the 10 win. I think maybe it's a 9-win season, but I will tell you.
I like the optimism. Hey, you got to have it.
We're going to get blown out in the playoffs. It's going to be fine because we're a young team, young quarterback, and he seems to be the type of guy that's going to work his butt off. And I could see it in the national championship conversation in 2 years from now. That's optimistic, obviously.
I like it. Hey, you gotta be optimistic. And I'm not so optimistic. I got to be honest, because we're in a turnaround right now, in a build. So I'm going with 7-5.
Okay.
And I got to be honest. I think I know where the 6th one's coming from. I don't know where the 7th, so it's going to take a little bit of work to get there. We may do a little repeat on a bet in a hoop season, but my expectations are down right now for
you
football.
Guys are a no question Sweet 16 team. You're not even a question. We're a bubble. We're an NIT team this year.
I appreciate that. Again, my confidence, I got this bad karma thing. I predict greatness, and then I keep the expectations low and want to exceed. It's the entrepreneur in you. You have to be an optimist.
You always have to manage your emotions. And so I am well known for the person that watches a quarter of the game. Michigan is not doing well, and I turn it off, and I'll leave.
Right, go take a walk.
Yeah, I'm done. And so 3 years in a row, I came and watched the OSU game because it's not worth
it's too much out here. Right. That sounds familiar. That honestly sounds familiar. So we'll wrap up with a question I like to ask all the guests on here. And what's interesting about you is you actually skew a little bit on the younger side. So you're closer to the question, and it's simple. It's not a regrets. It's more like the old, if I knew then what I know now, here you are, this 10-year journey. Even before that, the training of, we talked about AT&T and the other jobs, the other startup you did. Go back to like your 10 years, like your 2015 Krish starting NPHub.
Mm-hmm.
What do you, either you wish you knew, or if you knew it, you would have done maybe something different? What, again, not a regret, more a, what would I do different?
I think it's a big part of it. I used to say this, and I still to some extent believe it, but I used to say this a lot in like the 2018 range, 2020, 2022 range of this company will go as far as my self-esteem will take it. And especially when we were bootstrapped, right? And I was the only one accountable to it. And so I think at 25, I think that was a big issue. I just didn't believe, like I remember telling a mentor, this business, the max this industry could do is 2 million a year. This company, max will be 2 million a year. And he was like, why are you saying that?
Why are you limiting it? Yeah.
We just crushed the biggest month in August last month. And I think we did like 1.4 and it was like it was a record for us. We're going to have a $2 million a year next year in a month. And that is, I think self-limiting beliefs is probably like that crux of that conversation. And then I would say like practically, like tactically, like what I would say is you get what you tolerate. That is number one. You get what you tolerate. You tolerate mediocrity, you tolerate someone messing up your culture, and that's your fault. You own that. And then the second is you can never be clear enough. And so, I used to think like, okay, I could say something to someone once, or I'm really guilty of, if I understand how they think about things, I'll leave it alone. But the truth is I can understand how they think about things and just repeat the same place we're going so we don't
over and over.
And so I would say those are the big things. And then also hiring experts. Like when we brought in an operator, it took me a minute to let go, but a year and a half later, I mean, put it this way, before investment, we were growing 40% this year profitably without investment. And we navigated an investment process without a dip in the business.
Without a hiccup. Yeah. Awesome.
And the only reason we did that is because I had a excellent operator.
Someone who's been there and done it. On the job training can only take you so far.
100%.
Right?
100%.
At scale. So your second one is I don't say way more clever than that's the wrong way to put it. We had our CEO summit a couple of years ago. We went to West Point and we have it in the rotation because it's such a cool learning ground. And a lot of people are skeptical, like, where am I going to go shoot guns or learn military? The way they teach now our military leaders is very empathetic and very much business, if you will.
I would love, FYI.
You would enjoy it. I
in it.
But they have a saying there. This was actually a couple of years ago, but it's resonated because you said you get what you tolerate. The way they say it is you have the team you deserve.
Yeah.
That's their mantra, right? Where they're training these young, they're about to be, leaders of men, and they're only 22, 3, 4, and going to manage much older platoons and troops. And so it's more insightful than when you think about how many people the military's trained.
If I had to summarize the message I'm trying to teach my new managers, my directors, it's that you get what you tolerate, because there's an accountability component to it. And there's also, if you want better, just push it.
Yeah. Demand it.
Get better. Right? We can be better. And so, yeah, I would say those are probably the biggest messages.
I'll share a quick little anecdote. I hate to end these, but given your Queens roots, I'll tell you, and I believe he's a role model because he's in healthcare as well. But I just had the privilege of attending a 60th birthday. The guys made our biggest return ever. And they started a foundation. This is not only a tease to do really well, but they call it Jack, J-A-K, and they had a little space Q. And I thought, so my wife, the invitation, we thought it was the production company or something, because it was like, we didn't know what and it was, the foundation ends up being called Just a Kid from Queens. So you can take that one in the future, and, Just a Kid from Queens too, as you go scale the hell out of NPHub. I hope I leave that as an inspiration, because he's, first of all, been tremendous success, but the give back part of entrepreneurs, we all like to do that, right? So that's
100%.
That's kind of part of his DNA, if you will.
I love that. And that's, probably an angle I'm thinking about playing as well. Let me go crush it here for a few years. And then when I'm done with it, what's like that foundation, that model of,
how do you get back?
Well, I think it's, one of my dreams is to figure out how we can teach entrepreneurship to South Asian kids. Because again, you don't learn it, right? You learn, hey, go be a doc, go be an engineer.
You heard, right? That's the only way to success, that professional degree.
So it's like, there's another route and you could actually do great, And so.
Love it. Well, look, Krish Chopra, this was a lot of fun. Really appreciate you spending the time with us. And I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs that you've shared some insights that hopefully they take and run with. But the real pleasure, I know I pass that along from all my partners, but especially Kelly Ford, who led your investment and really enjoys working with you. And I look forward, as you noted, spend a little more time with you at the CEO Summit. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me.
Have a great day.
Later. Bye.
Thank you for joining this episode of Electrifying Growth. A special thanks to this week's guest for sharing their time and insight. For more resources, inspiration, and a look inside the Edison Partners Network, sign up for our newsletter at www.edisonpartners.com. Click on the Stay in the Know button in the top right corner of our webpage. Thank you again.